All right, let's hop into learning this Dvorak, shall we? The first thing you need to do is watch video 1, look up the fingerings, learn the fingerings you need to know, learn your roadmap, and take a listen to the piece. After you've done that, you're ready to watch this video. So what you need is, you definitely need your flute out right now. I'm gonna do a quick review on putting your flute together. On your foot joint, please make sure that your rod on the foot joint, it looks really nice when it's in line with the rod of the body, but it's not meant to be there. It's really meant to be somewhere like around halfway, pointing up the middle of the last key. Depending on the length of your pinky, you may need to adjust that slightly, but double check that. And up here, your embouchure hole should be more or less in line with the first key on the flute. Of course, we don't play that key, but that's a good guide for where it should be, give or take, okay? Okay, moving on. The way that I want you to start this, oh, you also need a metronome, apologies, and a pencil. Unless you have multiple copies, I would use a pencil. If you have multiple copies, use marker, use, I don't know, pen, whatever, gel pens, whatever you want. But if you only have one copy, use a pencil so you can erase it. Okay. The first thing you need to do is find your own personal, what I call the can't mess it up tempo. It's a tempo that is so slow that the piece is so unbelievably easy that you can't possibly make a single mistake. Okay, so I am going to put my metronome at 56. Check out how slow this is. I'm just going to play a little bit. So on and so forth. When you're practicing technique like this, you can take the repeat if you want, or just go on to the next section. Doesn't matter to me. It might be nice to keep the repeat so you understand the roadmap even better. One thing I want you to think about when you're doing this technique practice is isolate your practice goals. If we're working on technique right now, it's okay if you let the dynamics go. It's okay if you let the articulation go. It's okay if you let the style go. It's okay if you breathe anywhere. And in fact, when you're purely learning technique, when I'm purely learning technique, I often breathe anywhere and everywhere, and I take a whole beat to do it. I don't try to breathe in the rhythm. I don't try to take sit breaths, okay? I just stop and I breathe. I'm not practicing breathing right now. I'm under tempo. It doesn't make sense to practice the breathing part. So breathe anywhere, take a full beat to breathe, doesn't matter. So after you find your can't mess it up tempo, feel free to hit the up arrow on your metronome. Depending on where you are, you might find that you can go up 4-5 clicks in a day in one practice session. What you will find eventually is you'll kind of hit what I call that roadblock, where sometimes you can do it at the next tempo, but it's not always consistent, so you have to go back down. It's always okay to go back down and work yourself back up, okay? Take the time now to learn it slow and learn it correctly. Wonderful. I was going to make a few more videos breaking this down, but because everything is due sooner than I thought, I'm going to keep going. Okay, I'm going to skip a couple of steps. Once you are kind of really getting the technique down, I would start adding in things like dynamics, like the articulation, and maybe even start thinking about a breathing scheme. Speaking of dynamics, how do we do dynamics on the flute? Well, you can think of it as, how fast is my airstream right now? If my airstream is pretty fast, you're probably playing at least a mezzo forte, if not louder. If your airstream is pretty slow, you're probably playing a mezzo forte or less. A mezzo piano or less. If you don't increase or decrease your airspeed at all, you're playing the same dynamic the whole time. You can test that theory with just your voice. If you increase the amount of air coming out of your mouth, you're louder. Sorry to yell at you. Same thing with the flute. If you increase the amount of air going through your flute, you're going to get louder. So here's an example of, here's my metronome, always on, still slow. Here's an example of me adding in the swell that you see at the second repeat sign, or the second ending, going into the next section. Listen to how clearly I am doing this gesture. So, couple secrets. Whenever you need to grow, you have to plan ahead and make sure you're starting somewhere less than you want to end up. If you're already at a 10 out of 10, it's not going to make any sense to go to a 20 out of 10. It's just going to sound horrible. So make sure you're playing quietly. The dynamic marking is technically a piano anyways. So if you need to adjust your airspeed to adjust your dynamics, I guess that is what I'm trying to say here. Your airspeed is your gas pedal, and your gas pedal comes from your core, from your like abdomen region, okay? That is your gas pedal on the flute. Yeah, lastly for this video, don't worry too much about your breathing yet. Until you're closer to tempo, it's going to be, I don't think it's going to be very effective to put in a breathing scheme yet. So until you are at about 120, 126 to the quarter note, actually stop and just take a breath wherever you need it. So here's an example. I'm going to bump it up to 120, and I'm going to show you an example of playing this excerpt while I'm taking a breath anywhere and taking a whole beat to breathe. 120. So every time I took a breath, I stopped, right? I stopped, but I still kind of breathed in time. I breathed to the quarter note, I think, most of the time. So that's your goal, okay? So your goal is to find your can't mess it up tempo. Write it down. My favorite part about learning technique is being able to cross out my previous tempo and write in a higher number that I can play it faster. It's very validating. Don't judge me. So write down your tempo. Keep hitting up on your metronome. If you don't have a metronome, I think I bought this in the 90s and it still works. If you don't have a metronome, Google metronome and a metronome will pop up on your computer. It might be very quiet, so you might have to put in headphones to hear the metronome over your playing, or download an app on your phone. Again, it might be quiet, so you might have to plug in earphones. Keep bumping up on the met to get faster. As you start to feel more comfortable with the technique, add in dynamics, add in the articulation, things like that. And what was the last part? Oh, breathing. And make sure that you're not too invested in the breathing right now, but when you do take a breath, make sure it is a physical, active breath, okay? Breathing in flute world is an active thing. It's not like talking when you just breathe passively, okay? It's an active, physical breath, very athletic. Okay, that is video 2 for Mendelssohn. Get to work and watch for your next video.